everyone, it's Skiesti, and I've got some helpful tips for you for every part of Mercy's kit. We'll begin with Mercy's unique passive abilities, the first being Sympathetic Recovery. Basically, the way this works is Mercy heals herself for a portion of all the healing she does on teammates. Tip number 1 is that Sympathetic Recovery regenerates Mercy for 25% of her healing done, or 13.75 HP per second. When she uses her ultimate Valkyrie, the passive bumps up to a base of 15 HP per second to account for the increased healing output. Tip number 2 is to remember that Sympathetic Recovery basically makes Mercy a little vampire, which means you're leeching off of your teammates to replenish yourself. Typically, you don't want to take healing from your other support, but if you yourself need healing, don't be afraid to steal little bits of healing from allies as you need it. And tip number 3, Sympathetic Recovery stacks with the support role passive, which heals supports for 15 HP per second after not taking damage for 1.5 seconds. So if you're healing someone, you're regenning 28.75 HP per second normally, and a base of 30 HP per second in Valkyrie. With that said, Sympathetic Recovery also stacks with itself. That means if you're healing multiple teammates, your regen is increased even more to I think a cap of 75 HP per second if you're healing 4 allies at the same time. Mercy's second unique passive is her Angelic Descent, which slows down the rate she falls while in the air by holding down the jump or crouch keys. Because of this, tip number 1 is to make sure to turn toggle crouch off. Otherwise, it'll automatically trigger, which is pretty annoying and also quite bad for you. Tip number 2 is that normally Mercy's wings come out in Angelic Descent, but if you spam the activation keys, her wings will stay in, effectively decreasing her hitbox. Tip number 3 is you can utilize Angelic Descent to maintain your flight and keep yourself in the air longer. I'll usually trigger Angelic Descent at the apex of my jumps and press my movement keys to keep myself in the same area instead of potentially drifting or falling too fast. For a bonus tip, make sure you're switching up how you use this ability because it can be very easy for your movement to become predictable. Varying your usage of Angelic Descent can make your flight path more unpredictable and harder for enemies to hit. And a second bonus tip is if you super jump by crouching, Angelic Descent will take you straight down to where you started the jump. But if you angle your super jump and use the jump key to launch, your momentum will keep Angelic Descent traveling in the direction you were looking. Mercy's Caduceus staff is the most fundamental part of her kit, and I know some of you guys are going to be like, that's not how you pronounce it, but I promise you it is. Anyway, Mercy heals a single target for 55 HP per second with her healing beam, which then gets bumped up to 60 HP per second during Valkyrie. However, for tip number 1, if you keep healing a target after Valkyrie ends, you will continue to heal at 60 HP per second until you swap to damage boost, swap to another target, or disconnect your beam. Speaking of disconnecting, tip number 2 is that Mercy's beams maintain connection for 1.3 seconds. Once she exits her beam range or loses line of sight of her target, then she'll lose the connection. But that timer resets whenever you re-enter its range or line of sight. You can make the most of this timer to temporarily play out of range or behind cover, keeping yourself safer, and it also gives you more room to be creative with Guardian Angel. For tip number 3, Mercy's beam only has a range of 15 meters, so you're going to have to play pretty close to your targets to maximize beam uptime. If someone needs healing and they're way out of your range, it's okay to let your other support heal them, instead of risking your life by playing out of position to get to them. What's Skiesti? What do I do if an ally is going to die? Should I heal them? Should I damage boost them? What do I do? Well, as a bonus tip, if your ally is going to die anyway, you can heal them if keeping them alive for a while longer would secure a kill. Otherwise, you might as well just damage boost them so they can get some ult charge and your team can regroup faster, or you might even find an opportunity to res them later. And bonus tip number 2, Mercy is one of the few supports that can actually heal through shields, so keep in mind that if an ally is behind an enemy shield taking damage, you might need to be the one to heal them until they back out or the shield is destroyed. One of the more impactful aspects of Mercy's kit is her damage boost or blue beam, which allows her to increase the damage output of allies. Tip number 1 is the beam must be applied to your ally before they shoot or use an ability. If you damage boost after their shot or ability, it won't be applied. It won't be applied aside for a few exceptions which I cover in my damage boost guide. Tip number 2 is my biggest damage boost tip. And you've heard me say this before probably. If you're struggling to get value out of damage boost, I highly recommend swapping damage boost to primary fire and healing to secondary fire. Doing this will reaffirm in your mind that damage boost is Mercy's primary function and where she gets her value from. Instead of thinking when and where you can squeeze in some damage boost, you'll be thinking about when to heal and defaulting more to damage boost. I know many Mercy players have been hesitant to do this because when pulling out your blaster you would have to use your secondary fire, but there's now an option to select her pistol input in your control settings so you can actually change what mouse button her pistol is set to, and that is no longer a problem. Tip number 3 is don't be afraid to damage boost even if your allies are injured. Prioritizing damage boost during fights and waiting to heal during downtimes can decrease time to kill, meaning your team can secure kills faster even if they're taking some damage. Remember, your team doesn't all need to be at full health for you to damage boost, and you can rely on your other support to heal too. When it comes to damage boost, because it's probably the most important part of Mercy's kit, again, make sure you check out my damage boost guide to learn even more about how to maximize your Billy Beam usage. Mercy's personal damage dealing method comes from her pistol or Caduceus blaster. It's an automatic projectile blaster with 25 bullets that does 20 damage per shot and 40 for a headshot. Tip number 1 is that since it's a projectile, there is travel time between when you fire and when it hits a target. Make sure to lead your shots to where you think the target is going to be rather than shooting directly at them. For tip number 2, it takes 1.4 seconds to reload, but if you swap to Mercy's staff during that time, the blaster will automatically reload in the same time when you switch back. And tip number 3 is Mercy's blaster has the option to be set at a different sensitivity than her staff. If you're someone who has a very high sensitivity for Mercy like me, you should definitely lower her blaster sensitivity to be able to more accurately land your shots. Guardian Angel is Mercy's primary movement ability. It allows her to fly to her allies and is her main line of defense from being attacked by enemies. It's also the most complicated and intricate part of her kit. Normally, Guardian Angel is on a 1.5 second cooldown, but if you press crouch or jump during her flight, it increases to a 3-second cooldown. If you're enjoying the video, I stream every day except for Saturday over on Twitch and constantly post on various different social medias. Also, consider joining our Discord community. We'd love to see you there. Thank you, and back to the video. Starting off with the basic tip, when Mercy is in flight, a meter is charged that determines her jump strength at the end of the Guardian Angel. The higher the meter, the farther or higher you will go if you jump in any direction. Because of the movement's trajectory, it's incredibly common for Guardian Angel to cause Mercy to hit her head on doorways or other map geometry. So tip number 2 is to prevent this, try looking down and jumping as you're going through doorways, or press crouch at the same time you start your Guardian Angel to bring yourself lower to the ground as you fly. You should be able to clear those doorways, no problem. Tip number 3 is incredibly important. There are 2 ways to super jump with Mercy, using either your crouch key or jump key in your Guardian Angel. Crouching will trigger the basic super jump, which will launch you straight up in the air. Looking in any direction and pressing jump in your Guardian Angel will slingshot you in that direction. If you look up or down, you will super jump in an arc instead of straight up like the crouch super jump and have more control over Mercy's flight. You should really take advantage of the angled super jump, which is that last one I mentioned. A bonus tip is because Mercy's Guardian Angel, when jumping or crouching, gives you a 3-second cooldown. Instead of slingshotting, I'd recommend trying to bunny hop more. It won't take you as far as the slingshot does, but your cooldown will come back faster and allow you to reposition sooner. To do the bunny hop, Guardian Angel toward your target, then let go of Guardian Angel and press jump when you get there. Do not jump before your Guardian Angel. Oh, and one more bonus tip is when you're close to an ally and want to use them as a Guardian Angel target, you typically won't go very far because the meter doesn't have much time to fill up. If you hold Guardian Angel a little longer at your target, you can fill the meter up a bit more. Make sure you don't hold Guardian Angel for too long before jumping though, or else you'll just stop. Resurrection is a very unique part of Mercy's kit. When Mercy is within 5 meters of a recently killed teammate teammate's souls, she can resurrect them on a 30-second cooldown to bring them back into the fight after a small cast time. A little known tip about resurrection is once you're in range of a res, the ability actually extends its range by 2 meters while casting. This gives you some extra space to move around without canceling the res. Tip number 2 is if you're alone while rezzing, you can actually swap between your staff and blaster in the middle of casting a res, just on the off chance you might have to fight off an enemy after. Tip number 3 is you can communicate your res cooldown to your teammates by pinging a teammate's soul. If res is on cooldown, Mercy has a voice line that will say she can't help yet, but if it's available, she will declare her intent to res. This can be helpful for letting your team know you're either not with them or want help getting the res off before you actually do it. If you don't have res quite yet, but it will be available before your ally respawns, Mercy will still declare her intent to res. A bonus tip if you need to reposition quickly after rezzing a teammate is to try placing your crosshair on a different ally and hold down Guardian Angel so you can fly to them as soon as the res animation is finished. Mercy's ultimate ability, Valkyrie, allows her to fly freely and heal or damage boost multiple targets in her range for 15 seconds. She has increased movement speed, constant regeneration, and the range of her Guardian Angel and beams double. For the first tip, Mercy's Guardian Angel cooldown is at 1.5 seconds regardless of super jumps or slingshots or just regular Guardian Angels. For tip number 2, it's important to note that when you pop Valkyrie, your beam will disconnect. Keep this in mind if you're healing a low health teammate and thinking of using your ult. Tip number 3 is when you're in Valkyrie, you can see enemy health bars, which gives you a lot of information you can relay to your team, or you can dive in and finish off a kill on your own if you'd really like to, but only do that if you're really confident about it. Now, I've got so many bonus tips for Valkyrie. The first one is since Valkyrie resets Guardian Angel's cooldown immediately, don't be afraid to use it to save yourself if you're caught with your Guardian Angel on cooldown, as long as it means you can help your team win the fight. People very often ask how to use Valkyrie, so bonus tip number 2 is Valkyrie is a great tempo ultimate since it can maintain your team's momentum and help secure a team fight win. Now, if you don't really know what tempo means or what valking for tempo means maintaining your team's momentum, and so valking for tempo, you're providing increased value to your team by healing or damage boosting everyone in range, allowing the entire team to stabilize and keep being aggressive instead of backing up to heal. Also, Mercy's constant health regen of the support role passive in Valkyrie makes it easier to pull off slightly riskier reses in the middle of a team fight to maintain tempo. The last bonus tip is when using Valkyrie, please do not fly straight up and look down at your team. This is a really common mistake I see a lot of Mercies make, and it puts you in a really easy position to be punished by the enemy. The only real exception to this rule is if the enemy team doesn't have any heroes that can shoot you down in the air, or if you're using rooftops as cover. Instead, try to play lower to the ground and angle yourself so you can see both teams in the fight and hide behind cover if you need to. And that's all for me for now. Let me know what you thought of the tips, and if they're useful, and if so, which one you like the best. Or maybe which one have you never heard before. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.